Another major feature of the Agile Cloud Manager is that the Agile Cloud Manager can make it very, very easy for you to migrate your systems back and forth, not only between any cloud provider or between any region within any cloud provider, but also back and forth between any on-prem or any edge. And when we talk about on-prem and edge, we're talking not just about legacy data centers, but we're also talking about data rooms, and we're talking about devices that your users have. Sometimes you find that as you move items to the cloud, some of the components of the apps and systems that get moved to the cloud need to get shifted back to the edge or need to get shifted back to a data room so that certain pieces of logic can run closer to the end users and so that other pieces of logic can run closer to the central administration of all of your systems. All of your distributed systems might benefit from having certain types of operations occurring in localized regions, whether those localized regions are in the cloud or at the edge where the customers are. You find that out based on how your systems operate as you deploy them. And one of the great things about the Agile Cloud Manager is that you can more easily migrate systems back and forth between locations as a result of the simplicity that your systems can start to show when you encapsulate your systems within the interfaces that the Agile Cloud Manager makes available. So let's take a look at how this works. First, the idea of multi-cloud can actually be less expensive when you use the Agile Cloud Manager than with current methods. And here's why. Reduced engineering costs can show up in your financial statements each month and each quarter because you're able to reuse a smaller number of templates when you use the Agile Cloud Manager. Reusing templates means you pay less money to maintain those templates and less money to develop new templates. In addition, your operations costs can be lower because it can cost less to deploy and maintain your systems when you're using the command line interface that's available from the Agile Cloud Manager, instead of attempting to develop and maintain huge amounts of pipeline code that are no longer necessary after you've deployed the Agile Cloud Manager that encapsulates much logic that you would otherwise have to develop yourself. So the idea of multi-cloud with the Agile Cloud Manager is that you can reinvest part of the savings that come from becoming more efficient into developing an analogous version of an app for another cloud or for a different on-prem or for an edge. The idea is that the designs for these versions are compatible between multiple clouds, on-prem and edge. And here's a little picture of how. First, in the Agile Cloud Manager, remember we've got appliance templates and we've got system templates. And then we also have these lower level building blocks that you've already got in your organization that are produced by other tools, for example, CloudFormation or Terraform or ARM templates or Packer or other templating languages and tools. The idea here is that when you design for multi-cloud or when you design for migrating back and forth between different clouds, different on-prems and different edges, everything above the system template level can be almost identical between providers. Because you remember an appliance template with the Agile Cloud Manager is just a very short list of references to the system templates that will be used. So these appliance templates can be very, very similar from one cloud to another cloud. And when you get to the system template level, what's inside the system templates, they can also be very similar as well between clouds and between on-prems and between edges. For example, let's look at an AWS version of an app or a system that you might develop. It's going to have system templates written in the Agile Cloud Manager's domain-specific language, and those system templates are going to have the same object model that you might have in any other cloud or on-prem. And the only thing really that's going to be different with them are the variables. And the reason for that is that AWS and Azure and Google and other types of cloud providers and other types of on-prem and edge providers are going to have slightly different structures for the way that their objects work. And so you have to pass slightly different types of variables in, but it's essentially the same structure, the same objects, because you've designed your systems to be extremely similar, in fact, even almost identical from cloud to cloud. So the variables are slightly different, but everything else about the system templates are going to be almost identical. And let's see how this looks. For example, if you build an analogous model in Azure, you have the same system templates with the same object model, just different variables. In Google, you have, again, very similar system templates with the same object model and slightly different variables. Your on-prem might have very similar system templates with the same object model and different variables. And your different edges might have the same system templates with the same object model and slightly different variables. The basic building blocks are going to be analogous to each other. And when we say analogous, we mean that in each provider, in each cloud provider, or in each on-prem or each edge, the same types of things are being provided by the cloud provider. It's just that they use slightly different names and they've got slightly different rules. And so you design something that looks pretty much almost the same, and the key pieces of it are going to be the same. For example, the operating systems are going to be the same, and operating systems relate to your disk images. Disk images are going to use the same operating systems, and they're going to have almost the same provisioning for them. And the networking is going to be very, very similar, with the idea that the only differences in networking between different cloud providers or between on-prem and edge is that the words are slightly different. The structure is slightly different based on what's provided by the company that's producing this service. For example, if you're in AWS, they're going to have slightly different language and objects for networking than Azure is, and they're certainly going to use different names for it. But if you look at everything that's provided by each of the cloud providers and each of the on-prem solutions and each of the edge solutions, you can find things that more or less do the same thing, even though they've got different names. So the basic building blocks are going to be analogous to each other with the same disk images in networks that are designed to be very, very similar to each other. And when you look at all this together, you can see that we've created a budget for multi-cloud or for migration between different on-prems and different places in the cloud, or between different edges and on-prem and cloud. And the way we've created that is through all of the efficiency benefits that can be derived from using the Agile Cloud Manager. And as we've then created a budget, then what we do is create very similar system definitions with very similar low-level building blocks so that everything is analogous. And at the highest level of the command line interface, it's identical. It's completely transparent so that your systems can just migrate from one cloud provider or one on-prem or one edge to another very quickly, because at the command line interface level, it's the exact same command. And at the levels deeper into your system definitions, things are defined in ways that are very, very compatible. So now let's look at what a pipeline looks like when you're going to migrate back and forth between different implementations of the same thing in a different cloud provider or in a different on-prem or in a different edge. With migrating back and forth between cloud providers or between different on-prems or between different edges, a simple blue-green deployment can be the best approach. So let's look at what this can seem to be. We start in step one here with an analogous clone of the same system or the same appliance in a different cloud or a different on-prem or a different edge. And we can do this by typing in the command ACM appliance on. It's that simple. You're running a new appliance, you just type in ACM appliance on, you have your pipeline run the ACM appliance on command, and the Agile Cloud Manager spins up the new appliance in whichever environment you want it to be in, whichever cloud provider you want it to be in, whichever on-prem or whichever edge. From that, the next step is you replicate all of the relevant data into the new clone of the appliance using whatever data replication tools you've already got that you use normally in your organization, tools like Kafka or Veeam or other tools. And then you move to the automated testing phase, where after everything's been spun up into the new environment, all the data's been sent in, you run all of your normal automated tests. After the tests have passed, you change your DNS pointers to the new clone. and traffic gets routed to the new clone like you do in a simple blue-green deployment, and you wait. And after some period of waiting and making sure that there are no problems, you validated that the new environment works, you validated that everything's great in the new cloud provider or in the new on-prem or in the new edge. As soon as that's been validated, then you remove the old version by just running the simple command ACM appliance off. And that's how simple it can be to migrate back and forth between different cloud providers or different on-prems or different edges using the Agile Cloud Manager. It starts in the preceding slide by creating a budget through all the efficiency benefits. And then after you've created a budget, by saving all of the money that you can save by implementing this tool correctly. Once you've created this immense benefit with this great budget that you've made available for money that you used to be spending, now you have a little bit of money to create an analogous version in the desired second cloud. And then you build that. And as you build that, you deploy it using this simple set of steps in a blue-green deployment. You can download the Agile Cloud Manager for free at agilecloudinstitute.io. And you can hire the Agile Cloud Institute to perform technical support, training, and consulting. You can get more information and you can contact us through agilecloudinstitute.io.